different ideas that come to mind. Maybe it's old men stroking their beards and thinking about deep stuff. Or maybe it's something that's supposed to unlock the key to the meaning of life. Or maybe it's something that's kind of just distant and hazy and kind of out there without really any concrete ideas or answers. My personal journey in philosophy wasn't one that really began until very recently. I had always been so interested in medicine. I was trying to engross myself in medical environments, learn a lot about it. But there was always this kind of late night philosophical thinker part of me that I could really never let go of. And so eventually, 2 summers ago, or actually 1 summer ago, when I saw this listing for a class, I just on a whim decided to sign up for it. And in just a span of 2 months, I learned so many lessons about life and education, so many more than I ever thought I would learn in just that span of time. And I want to share a couple of those with you today. We live in a world today in which we feel this necessity to win arguments and to completely just obliterate our opponent when we're having a discussion or just, a simple chat. And in this process, like if you look at examples today, when we wake up in the morning and we're with our sibling, we walk into the car and we get into these really petty arguments over who gets to ride shotgun, right? We come to school and maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum, we get into a really heated debate about gun control or abortion. And the commonality between all of these arguments is the fact that we're always trying to push our opinions forward. And this is not a new concept at all. In fact, it's so old that if we go back many centuries, Socrates was battling the same issue as he was walking about in the streets of Athens and trying to have discussions with people. Because people put up these walls. He would put forth his questions and people were very resolved in their opinion and they didn't want to accept what it is that he was saying or even take a moment to consider it. And this is kind of a problem. This was really a problem when I started to read philosophy for the first time because, let me tell you, that was the most annoying loop of questions and answers and rebuttals and more questions and more answers I ever had to read in my entire life. But eventually I saw that maybe it wasn't just this whole useless circular loop. I saw that there was something that I could learn from this. There was the more obvious thing of, don't judge a book by its cover. But the thing that I hadn't realized before was the fact that arguments don't only exist internally, or they don't only exist externally, but they are constantly occurring internally as well. I wake up in the morning, I put on a shirt, I look in the mirror, and I'm like, I don't know if hot pink works on me. I come to school and I see that the TEDx auditions are up, and I'm like, I don't know, are my ideas really worth spreading? I don't know. And so in this process, I was creating this negative energy in my mind. And as I read philosophy, I saw that there was a very logical process in which arguments were approached, a very systematic way in which logical fallacies were broken apart, and I was able to use this in order to disintegrate this negative mental space that I had been creating for myself. And in this process, I didn't just discover a better way to argue, but I found a way to find a little bit of self-respect, and that definitely went a long way. Definitely a cute graphic. And in this process of learning about arguments, analyzing arguments, and seeing how they evolved over time, I realized that you don't really have to be this intellectual to study philosophy. And let me tell you, when I walked into that classroom for the first time, I was terrified, I was petrified. The youngest people in that classroom were in their 20s, and the oldest were in their 40s, and here I was, a little 16-year-old girl sitting up in the front with my little backpack and pencil case and everything, And the thing is, I just didn't feel like I had a place there. Everyone there had decades more experience just living life and collecting all these experiences. What did I, a little teenager, have to do with any of that? But as I had conversations with people, I realized that what a lot of people were able to bring into these conversations, these philosophical conversations, really came from their own personal, diverse backgrounds. Whether it was socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, religious, they were able to bring a new perspective to every single conversation, and soon enough I found that I could add my own voice into this mix. It wasn't just something that was reserved for old men stroking their beards. And in this process I saw that You don't have to know your history from the BCs to the 80s to feel worthy of studying philosophy. You don't need to feel worthy of it because you can do it. You can study philosophy. Isn't that crazy? And the reason for this is that the people who are the most successful in philosophy are the people who are able to let go of this fear of the unknown. They're the people who are able to say, I don't know much about this, but I want to go and I want to discover more. And it's in this journey and this exploration that you start to broaden your world. You start to broaden your mind, and you don't need to be this know-it-all intellectual in order to do that. And as I was studying these arguments and all these different things, I was like, this is actually kind of cool. I would have never thought that philosophy would have seemed cool, but there was something that was kind of itching in the back of my mind. What about the practicality of it all? It's great to think and all that, but how am I gonna make my moolah, How to make bucks? That's the important part. I'm looking at all of you guys, moms, dads, I'm totally calling you out right now. But I discovered a couple of statistics that showed that philosophy will actually get you a job. I know, that was absolutely mind-blowing. And if we take a look at some of these stats right here, if we look at the average annual salary and the average annual career salary growth of philosophers, they're actually much higher than a lot of very common STEM majors like biology, chemistry, economics, engineering, all these things that people tell you that you need to study in order to become successful, in order to have a secure future. And the reason for this, as I ended up discovering, is because philosophy is inherently interdisciplinary. You're learning about all these abstract concepts like ethics, aesthetics, epistemology, metaphysics, but you're able to take the skill set that you get from this and you're able to apply them to become a better problem solver, to become better at critical analysis, to essentially gain human skills, to learn how to interact with other people and understand them. And we have evidence of this today. The host of my absolute favorite game show, Jeopardy, Alex Trebek, social activist Angela Davis, and even actor Bruce Lee were all people who based their early education on philosophy and became very successful in a wide range of fields. So you can do it too. And lastly, the most significant part of my entire experience studying philosophy was being able to excavate ideas from thinkers that existed outside of ancient Greece and Europe. And for this, I really want to give my professor a shout out, Professor Chapman, because I feel like he really opened my eyes to this. And in the many stories that I was able to discover, the one that stood out the most to me was of Anton Wilhelm Amo. He was originally a slave from Ghana, and he was gifted to the Duke of Brunswick. And as part of a kind of experiment, he was educated in philosophy. And against all odds, he ended up publishing several significant refutes to Descartes' very own coveted Meditations. However, despite his great accomplishments, he was forgotten. He was smothered over by centuries of philosophers in ancient Greece and in Europe, and his voice was silenced. In fact, I would even say he's one of the most significant forgotten philosophers in history. And this is when I discovered that it's not that philosophy isn't diverse, it's that we haven't taken the time to give philosophers of diverse backgrounds the voice. Partly due to this platform that's already solidified of white male Greeks and Europeans who have already established themselves in history and in philosophy. And for me personally, not just as a person of color, but as a female of color, I find great significance in being able to continue unearthing more of these stories and finding more perspectives, because this is what's going to drive a field like philosophy forward. And in this process, I also hope to find my own voice as well in this field. And what I really want to talk about, what I really want to say, doesn't actually have to do with philosophy at all. I could really just go on and on and on about why I want to study it and why I love it so much. But we as individuals, we can make choices. We have choices that we can make, and as students especially, we can blame the education system for over-compartmentalizing, over-generalizing, but the fact of the matter is that you are in control of your own education. And when we have the privilege that we have with access to so many materials outside of the classroom, classes and opportunities, you should take advantage of it. If there's a class that's being offered and you even have a little bit of interest in it, just go for it and just dive into it and take it. Because it might teach you a small skill, or it might end up introducing you to an entirely new life perspective. Thank you.